I was standing in my driveway, snow shovel in hand, when I saw the white envelope tucked into my front door. My stomach dropped because I already knew what it was before I even opened it. Sure enough, the Clearwater Estates Homeowners Association had sent me another fine, this time for $1,500. The reason? Unauthorized trail maintenance on community property. Let me back up and explain how I ended up in this mess. My name is Patrick Barnes, and I live in Clearwater Estates, a planned community outside Fairbanks, Alaska. I bought my house here 5 years ago because of the location, the access to trails, and what I thought was a reasonable HOA that would stay out of my business. That last assumption turned out to be spectacularly wrong. I grew up in Alaska. My dad taught me how to ride snow machines before I could drive a car, and maintaining trails has been part of my life since I was 12 years old. When I moved to Clearwater Estates, one of the biggest selling points was the network of snow machine trails that connected to the county trail system. These trails were used by dozens of families in the neighborhood and by county residents who accessed the larger trail network through our community. The problem started about 3 years ago when the HOA board changed. The new president was a woman named Patricia Hendricks. She had moved to Alaska from Arizona 2 years prior and seemed to have strong opinions about everything despite understanding almost nothing about life in the interior. Patricia was in her early 50s, with the kind of haircut that screamed, "I want to speak to the manager," and an attitude to match. The trails in and around Clearwater Estates needed regular maintenance. Snow had to be groomed, fallen trees had to be cleared, and markers had to be replaced. For the first 2 years I lived there, I volunteered my time doing this work because I enjoyed it and because it helped everyone. The county actually provided me with a volunteer vest, some basic equipment, and even gave me an annual certificate of appreciation for my service. Other volunteers, and I would coordinate with the county's Parks and Recreation Department to make sure the entire trail system stayed safe and accessible. Patricia had other ideas. At the first HOA meeting after she became president, she stood up and announced that all trail maintenance had to be approved by the board. She said something about liability and insurance, though she clearly didn't understand what either of those words actually meant in this context. I raised my hand and tried to explain that the county coordinated the volunteer work and that we had been doing this for years without issue. The HOA needs to maintain control over what happens on community property, Patricia said, her voice tight with the kind of authority complex that comes from finally having a tiny bit of power. Going forward, all maintenance requests must be submitted in writing 30 days in advance. I looked around the room at the other homeowners. Most of them were just as confused as I was. Dave Morrison, who lived 3 houses down from me, spoke up. "Patricia, the trails need to be cleared sometimes on short notice. If a tree falls after a storm, we can't wait 30 days to move it." Patricia's expression hardened. Then perhaps people shouldn't be using the trails until they're properly maintained through official channels. The room erupted in protests. The trails weren't just recreational. They were how some people accessed their properties during heavy snow. They were how kids got to the school bus stop. They connected us to the wider community. But Patricia stood firm, and because she had stacked the board with 2 of her friends who had recently moved to the neighborhood, the policy passed. I tried to work within the system. I really did. The first time I submitted a maintenance request in writing, it took the board 6 weeks to respond. By that time, the issue I had identified had grown worse, and I had to do twice as much work to fix it. The county trail coordinator, a man named Richard Chen, was frustrated because the delay in our section was causing problems for the entire trail network. "I don't understand what's happening with your HOA," Richard told me over the phone one February afternoon. "We've worked with Clearwater Estates volunteers for almost a decade without problems. Now suddenly they want everything in triplicate." I explained the situation as best I could. Richard sighed. "Well, the county still needs those trails maintained. You're one of our best volunteers, Patrick. Last year alone, you logged over 200 hours of service. We're planning to give you the Volunteer of the Year award at the annual appreciation dinner." That recognition meant something to me. It wasn't about the award itself, but about being part of a community effort that made life better for everyone. The trails we maintained were used by hundreds of people. They were part of what made living in interior Alaska special, but Patricia saw it differently. After I received my second annual certificate from the county, she called me directly. It was a Saturday morning, and I was getting ready to head out for some maintenance work that I had submitted for approval 6 weeks earlier. "Mr. Barnes, this is Patricia Hendricks from the HOA board. I want to make something very clear to you." "Good morning, Patricia. What can I help you with?" "You can start by not undermining the authority of this board. I've heard that you received some kind of award from the county." I felt my jaw tighten. "Yes, they recognize the volunteer work I do maintaining the trail system. The same work I've been doing for years. Work that should be coordinated through this HOA. You're creating a liability issue for all of us, and frankly, it looks like you're trying to position yourself as some kind of hero while making the board look bad." I took a deep breath. Getting angry wouldn't help. "Patricia, the county manages the volunteer program. The HOA doesn't have any jurisdiction over county volunteer work. I'm happy to coordinate with the board on the portions of trail that are on community property, which is what I've been trying to do." "Well, the board has discussed this, and we've decided that all trail work needs to stop until we can review our insurance policy and liability coverage. That could take months. What happens if there's an emergency? Then people will have to find alternative routes." "This conversation is over, Mr. Barnes. Consider this your official warning." She hung up before I could respond. I stood in my kitchen, phone still in my hand, trying to process what had just happened. The trails were going to fall into disrepair because Patricia was on some kind of power trip. People were going to be inconvenienced or potentially put in danger because she couldn't stand the idea of someone doing something without her explicit permission. I called Richard Chen and explained what had happened. He was quiet for a long moment. "Okay, here's the situation from the county's perspective. The trails that run through Clearwater Estates are on an easement. The development company granted that easement to the county back when the subdivision was first created. The HOA doesn't actually have authority to block county trail maintenance." "Really? Can you send me something in writing about that?" "Absolutely. I'll email you the easement documents today. The county has the right to maintain those trails and to use authorized volunteers to do so. If the HOA has concerns, they need to take it up with the county, not with individual volunteers." That email arrived an hour later. I printed out the documents and read through them carefully. Richard was right. The easement gave the county explicit authority over the trails, and the HOA had no legal standing to block maintenance work. I forwarded the email to Patricia with a polite note explaining the situation. Her response came 2 days later in the form of another letter. This one informed me that I was in violation of HOA covenants regarding unauthorized commercial activity on community property. Commercial activity. I wasn't running a business. I was volunteering. but according to Patricia's letter, because I received recognition and compensation from the county, my volunteer work constituted a commercial enterprise. The fine was $500, due within 30 days. I called an attorney. Her name was Susan Rodriguez, and she had handled my real estate closing when I bought the house. I explained the situation, and she asked me to send her all the correspondence. "This is ridiculous," Susan said after reviewing everything. "Volunteer work isn't commercial activity. And they can't fine you for working on county property. You might have a case for harassment. I don't want to sue the HOA. I just want to maintain the trails without being hassled." "I understand, but sometimes you have to push back on these things. Let me draft a response. We'll cite the easement and explain why the fine is invalid. That might be enough to make them back off." Susan sent her letter to the HOA board. For a few weeks, things were quiet. I continued my volunteer work, documenting everything carefully and making sure I had written approval from the county for each maintenance session. The trails looked great, and I received thank you messages from several neighbors who used them regularly. Then spring arrived, and with it came another letter from the HOA. This time the fine was $1,000. The reason: damage to community landscaping. According to the letter, my trail maintenance activities had caused erosion and damage to plantings near the trailhead. This was completely false. I had photographs documenting the condition of everything I worked on, and there was no damage to any landscaping. I called Susan immediately. She was angry in a way I hadn't heard before. "They're retaliating against you for pushing back. This is getting into potentially illegal territory. I think we need to consider filing a complaint with the court. Let me try talking to the board first. Maybe if I can explain this face to face, we can work it out." The next HOA meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I showed up early with a folder full of documentation. The county easement, letters from Richard Chen praising my volunteer work, photographs showing the pristine condition of the landscaping, and copies of all the bogus fines the HOA had sent me. Patricia was already there, sitting at the head table with her two board allies, Linda Crawford and Michelle Baker. Both women had moved to Alaska within the past 3 years and seemed to view the state as some kind of exotic hardship posting rather than a real place where real people lived. The meeting started with standard business: approval of minutes, discussion of the budget, complaints about someone's mailbox color. Then Patricia got to what she called enforcement issues. "We have a homeowner who continues to violate HOA rules despite multiple warnings and fines. Mr. Barnes has been performing unauthorized work on community property, engaging in commercial activity without board approval, and causing damage to community assets." I raised my hand. I'd like to respond to those accusations. Patricia's expression tightened. "This isn't a trial, Mr. Barnes. The board has already made its determination. With all due respect, I think the other homeowners deserve to hear the facts." I stood up and held up my folder. "I have documentation here that contradicts everything you just said. The trails I maintain are on a county easement. The HOA has no authority over them. I'm not engaged in commercial activity. I'm volunteering my time. And I have photographs proving that there's no damage to any landscaping." Dave Morrison spoke up from the back of the room. "I use those trails every weekend. Patrick does great work, and I've never seen any damage to anything. What's this really about?" Patricia's face flushed red. "This is about following the rules and respecting the authority of this board. Mr. Barnes seems to think he can do whatever he wants without consequences." "I'm following the county's volunteer program guidelines," I said, keeping my voice level. "I've been doing this for 5 years. The only thing that changed is this board deciding it has authority it doesn't actually have. Other homeowners started chiming in. It turned out a lot of people were frustrated with Patricia's leadership. She had been sending out fines for all kinds of minor violations. Grass that was supposedly too long, holiday decorations that stayed up too many days, cars parked in driveways instead of garages. People were tired of the constant harassment. The meeting devolved into a shouting match. Patricia tried to maintain control, but the room had turned against her. Finally, she stood up and declared the meeting adjourned, then stormed out with Linda and Michelle following behind her. I thought maybe that public confrontation would be the end of it. Instead, it made things worse. 2 weeks later, I received the fine that started this whole story. $1,500 for unauthorized trail maintenance. I called Susan Rodriguez again. This time, I told her to do whatever was necessary to make this stop. I'm going to file a motion for injunctive relief and a complaint for harassment, Susan said. We're also going to demand they rescind all the fines. This has gone way beyond a simple HOA dispute. The legal process moved slowly. Susan filed the paperwork, and the HOA had 30 days to respond. During that time, I kept volunteering with the county trail program. Richard Chen told me that the county was considering intervening in the dispute because the HOA's actions were interfering with the county's easement rights. We can't have HOAs blocking access to county trails, Richard said. This sets a dangerous precedent. Our legal department is reviewing the situation. In early June, I received a letter from the county's attorneys. They had sent a cease and desist letter to the Clearwater Estates, HOA, demanding that the board stop interfering with authorized county volunteers and respect the terms of the trail easement. The letter also threatened legal action if the interference continued. I didn't hear anything from Patricia for 2 weeks after that. Then one evening, I came home from work to find her standing in my driveway. She looked tired and angry in equal measure. "You've made things very difficult for the board," she said without preamble. The board made things difficult for itself by ignoring the law and harassing a volunteer. We're trying to protect this community. You don't seem to understand the liability issues involved. I took a deep breath. Despite everything, I didn't enjoy conflict with my neighbors. Patricia, I do understand liability. I've been doing volunteer trail maintenance for 15 years. The county has insurance that covers volunteers. The easement protects the HOA from liability. There is no risk to the community. The only problem here is that you decided to make this a power struggle. The board has the authority to enforce our covenants. Not when you're making up violations that don't exist. You can't fine me for working on county property. You can't claim volunteer work is commercial activity. And you definitely can't accuse me of damaging landscaping when the photographs prove otherwise. Patricia's jaw worked like she was chewing on something bitter. We'll see what the court says. Yes, we will. She turned and walked away. I watched her go, feeling a mix of frustration and pity. Patricia had moved to Alaska looking for something, maybe a fresh start or a simpler life, but she'd brought all her need for control with her. Instead of embracing the community and the lifestyle, she was trying to force everything to conform to her vision of how things should be. The court date was set for August. Susan was confident we would win, but she warned me that HOA disputes could sometimes take unexpected turns. Judges don't like HOAs that abuse their power, she explained during a meeting in her office. But they also generally try to respect the authority of HOAs to govern their communities. We need to make it crystal clear that this board has exceeded its authority and is harassing you specifically. I have all the documentation. I know you do. You've been very thorough. That's going to help us a lot. In July, something unexpected happened. I received a call from the county's Parks and Recreation Director, a woman named Angela Morrison. She asked if I could come to her office for a meeting. When I arrived, Richard Chen was there along with Angela and a man I didn't recognize. He introduced himself as Tom Bradford from the county attorney's office. "Mr. Barnes, we want to thank you again for your volunteer service," Angela said. "You've been one of our most reliable and dedicated volunteers for years. This situation with your HOA has brought some issues to our attention, and we wanted to discuss them with you." Tom Bradford leaned forward. "The county takes the position that the Clearwater Estates HOA has been interfering with the county's legal rights under the trail easement. We're prepared to file an amicus brief supporting your case. We're also considering whether to file our own lawsuit against the HOA for interference with the easement." I felt a surge of relief. Having the county's official support would make a huge difference. "I appreciate that. This whole situation has been incredibly stressful." "We understand," Angela said. "We also want you to know that we're recognizing you at next month's Volunteer Appreciation Dinner. You'll be receiving the Volunteer of the Year award for the second time. Given everything you've dealt with this year while continuing to maintain the trails, we felt it was especially important to acknowledge your dedication. The award itself wasn't important to me, but the recognition of the work mattered. It validated that what I was doing was valuable to the community, not the violation Patricia kept claiming it was." The court hearing took place on a hot August afternoon. The Clearwater Estates courthouse was modern and climate-controlled, a relief from the summer heat. Susan and I sat at one table, while Patricia sat at another with the HOA's attorney, a nervous-looking man named Gary Peterson. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Sarah Mitchell. She had a reputation for no-nonsense rulings and a low tolerance for frivolous litigation. Susan presented our case methodically. She showed the court the trail easement documents, proving the county had authority over the trails. She presented letters from Richard Chen and other county officials praising my volunteer work. She showed the photographs disproving the landscaping damage allegations. She documented every fine the HOA had issued and explained why each one was baseless. Then she brought up the bigger picture. "Your Honor, this isn't really about trail maintenance or HOA covenants. This is about a board president who decided she didn't like a homeowner standing up to her, and who has used her position to engage in systematic harassment. My client has been volunteering his time to improve his community, and he's been rewarded with thousands of dollars in bogus fines." Gary Peterson stood to present the HOA's case. He seemed uncomfortable as he argued that the board had the right to enforce its rules, and that my volunteer work violated various covenants. His argument was undermined by the fact that he couldn't point to any specific covenant I had violated, just vague language about unauthorized activities. Judge Mitchell interrupted him several times to ask pointed questions. "Mr. Peterson, how does the board justify fining a homeowner for activities that take place on county property? The trails run through the community, Your Honor. The board has an obligation to oversee what happens within the development. But the county has an easement. The HOA doesn't have authority over that property. Are you arguing that the board can supersede a legal easement?" Gary Peterson fumbled for a response. It was clear he knew the HOA's position was weak. Then it was Tom Bradford's turn. He stood and introduced himself as representing the county's interests. "Your Honor, the county has significant concerns about this case. The Clearwater Estates HOA has interfered with the county's legal rights under a recorded easement. They have attempted to prevent authorized county volunteers from performing maintenance work that is essential to public safety. If this interference is allowed to continue, it will set a precedent that could affect trail access throughout the borough. Judge Mitchell listened carefully to all the arguments. Then she asked Patricia to stand. "Miss Hendricks, you're the HOA board president?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Can you explain to me why your board has been fining Mr. Barnes for volunteer work he performs under county authorization?" Patricia launched into an explanation about liability and oversight and community standards. It was the same talking points she had been using for months, but they sounded even more hollow in a courtroom. Judge Mitchell cut her off. "Miss Hendricks, I've reviewed all the documents in this case. The trail easement is clear. The county has authority over those trails. Your board has no legal basis to fine Mr. Barnes for work he does on county property. Furthermore, the accusation of commercial activity is absurd. Volunteer work is by definition non-commercial. And the claim about landscaping damage appears to be completely fabricated. Do you have any actual evidence to support that allegation?" Patricia's face went red. "I saw the damage with my own eyes. Mr. Barnes has photographs dated both before and after his maintenance work showing no damage." "Do you have any photographs or other evidence?" "I didn't think to take photographs, but I know what I saw." Judge Mitchell's expression hardened. "So your answer is no, you have no evidence. Miss Hendricks, it appears to me that your board has engaged in a pattern of harassment against Mr. Barnes. The court does not look favorably on HOAs that abuse their authority to target individual homeowners." The judge delivered her ruling from the bench. All fines against me were rescinded. The HOA was ordered to pay my attorney's fees. The board was permanently enjoined from interfering with my county volunteer work. And Judge Mitchell added something extra. The HOA was ordered to send a letter to all homeowners explaining that county volunteer work was authorized and that the board had no authority to prevent it. "Furthermore," Judge Mitchell said, looking directly at Patricia, "I'm putting the board on notice. If there are any further frivolous fines or retaliatory actions against Mr. Barnes, this court will consider sanctions against the board members personally." "You understand?" Patricia nodded, looking like she wanted to disappear into the floor. We walked out of the courthouse into the bright August sunshine. Susan was grinning. "That went even better than I expected." Judge Mitchell clearly saw through their nonsense. "Thank you for everything," I said. "I couldn't have fought this without you." "You shouldn't have had to fight it at all, but at least now there's a clear ruling. The HOA can't touch you." I thought that would be the end of the story. I was wrong. 2 weeks after the court ruling, I attended the county's annual volunteer appreciation dinner. It was held at a community center in Fairbanks, with about 80 volunteers in attendance along with county officials and staff. Richard Chen gave a speech about the importance of volunteer work and how much the trail system depended on people willing to donate their time. Then Angela Morrison called me up to receive the Volunteer of the Year award. As I walked to the front of the room, I saw several of my neighbors from Clearwater Estates in the audience. Dave Morrison was there, along with Karen and Steve Patterson and a few others. They gave me a standing ovation. Angela presented me with a plaque and a certificate. Then she did something unexpected. I want to read part of a letter we received from one of Patrick's neighbors. This letter explains why volunteer work matters and why we need to support people like Patrick, who give their time to improve our community. The letter was from Dave Morrison. He talked about how the trails connected our neighborhood to the wider community, how my maintenance work made it safe for families to use the trails, and how the HOA's harassment had threatened something that benefited hundreds of people. He ended by saying, "Patrick Barnes represents the best of what it means to be an Alaskan and a community member. The county is right to honor him, and I'm proud to call him my neighbor." I felt my throat tighten. Public recognition wasn't something I was comfortable with, but hearing those words meant more than I could express. After the ceremony, several people came up to talk to me. Some were other volunteers who had heard about my HOA troubles. Others were county residents who used the trails I maintained and wanted to thank me directly. One older woman told me she felt safe riding her Snowmachine because she knew the trails were well maintained, and that sense of safety had given her freedom she wouldn't otherwise have. That's when I realized what this was really about. It wasn't about me or Patricia or the HOA. It was about the fundamental question of what kind of community we wanted to be. Did we want to be a place where people helped each other and worked together, or a place where petty rules and power struggles took precedence over common sense and human decency? I drove home that evening feeling validated but also exhausted. The fight had taken a lot out of me, and I was looking forward to things going back to normal, but Patricia wasn't done. A few days after the volunteer dinner, I received an email from the HOA. It wasn't from Patricia directly, but from the board's email address. The message informed me that the HOA was instituting a special assessment to pay for the legal fees and my attorney's fees as ordered by the court. The assessment would be divided among all homeowners, and my share was $1,800. I stared at the email in disbelief. They were trying to make me pay for part of the judgment against them. It was petty and vindictive, and I was pretty sure it was also illegal given the court's order. I forwarded the email to Susan Rodriguez. She called me an hour later, and she was furious. This is exactly the kind of retaliatory action Judge Mitchell warned them about. I'm filing an emergency motion for sanctions tomorrow morning. This is going to cost them way more than they're trying to charge you. True to her word, Susan filed the motion the next day. She also sent a strongly worded letter to the HOA attorney, Gary Peterson, pointing out that the special assessment violated the court's order and constituted retaliation. The hearing for the sanctions motion was scheduled for early September. This time, Patricia didn't show up to court. Instead, Gary Peterson appeared alone and immediately asked to address the judge. "Your Honor, the HOA board has authorized me to withdraw the special assessment and to apologize to Mr. Barnes. The board acknowledges that the assessment was inappropriate." Judge Mitchell was not impressed. "Mr. Peterson, I specifically warned the board about retaliatory actions at the last hearing. This special assessment was sent out less than a month later. That's not a good faith mistake. That's deliberate defiance of this court's order. Your Honor, I've advised the board that their actions were improper. Apparently, your advice wasn't sufficient to prevent this from happening. I'm imposing sanctions of $5,000 against the HOA, payable to Mr. Barnes. I'm also ordering the board to undergo training on HOA governance and legal obligations. And I want to see evidence within 30 days that Ms. Hendricks is no longer serving as board president. If she is, I'm going to consider whether to hold her in contempt of court." That got everyone's attention. Gary Peterson nodded rapidly. "I'll convey that to the board, Your Honor." Susan filed a petition with the court requesting enforcement of the judgment. And the county attorney's office sent another letter to the HOA stating that any further interference with the trail easement would result in litigation. The next HOA board meeting was scheduled for the last Tuesday of September. I debated whether to attend, but Susan encouraged me to go. "You should be there to see this through. The board needs to understand that you're not going away and that they can't bully you." The meeting was packed. Word had spread about the court orders and the sanctions, and homeowners wanted to see what would happen. Patricia sat at the head table looking defeated. Linda Crawford and Michelle Baker looked uncomfortable. The meeting started with Dave Morrison standing up to address the board. "I'm calling for a vote of no confidence in the current board leadership. Patricia Hendricks has cost this HOA tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees, sanctions, and wasted time. She's made our community a laughingstock and created unnecessary conflict with the county. It's time for new leadership." Other homeowners voiced their agreement. One by one, people stood up to criticize Patricia's leadership and call for changes. It wasn't mean-spirited or cruel. People were simply tired of the drama and the expense. Patricia tried to defend herself, but her voice was weak. "I was trying to protect the community's interests. I believed that we needed stronger oversight of activities within the development." "By harassing a volunteer who was making our community better?" Dave asked. "That's not leadership, Patricia. That's a power trip." The vote was called. Patricia, Linda, and Michelle all resigned from the board effective immediately. New board members were nominated and elected on the spot, including Dave Morrison as the new president. After the meeting, Patricia approached me in the parking lot. She looked tired and older than her years. "I want you to know that I wasn't trying to hurt you personally," she said. "I really did think I was doing the right thing for the community." I considered her words carefully. I didn't think she was lying exactly. She probably had convinced herself that she was acting in the community's best interests, but good intentions didn't excuse harassment or abuse of power. "Patricia, the problem wasn't that you had concerns about liability or oversight. The problem was that you refused to listen when multiple people explained why your concerns were misplaced. You had the county telling you there was an easement. You had an attorney telling you the fines were baseless, and you had a judge telling you to stop. But you kept going because you couldn't admit you were wrong." She didn't respond. After a long moment, she walked to her car and drove away. I never had another substantive conversation with her. The new board took office in October. One of their first actions was to send a formal letter of apology to me and to the county. They also established a policy encouraging homeowners to participate in county volunteer programs and pledging the HOA's support for such activities. Dave Morrison called me a week after taking over as president. "Patrick, I want to thank you for standing up to Patricia. A lot of people were unhappy with her leadership, but nobody wanted to rock the boat. You fighting back gave the rest of us courage to demand change." "I just wanted to maintain the trails," I said. "I didn't set out to start a revolution." Dave laughed. "Sometimes that's how revolutions start. Anyway, the new board wants to recognize your service to the community. We're going to dedicate the main trailhead to you. There'll be a small plaque thanking you for your years of volunteer work." "That's really not necessary." "Maybe not, but we want to do it anyway. It's important for people to understand that this community values those who contribute, not those who tear others down." The trailhead dedication took place in early November, just after the first major snowfall of the season. The new snow had transformed the landscape, covering everything in pristine white. About 30 neighbors attended the small ceremony, along with Richard Chen representing the county. The plaque was simple: "Barnes Trailhead, dedicated to Patrick Barnes in recognition of his years of volunteer service maintaining the Clearwater Estates trail system. Thank you for making our community better." Richard Chen gave a short speech about the importance of volunteers and how the county relied on people like me. Then, Dave Morrison presented me with a gift from the HOA, a new high-end GPS unit for trail navigation and documentation. "We hope you'll keep maintaining our trails for years to come," Dave said. And we promise the HOA will support you instead of fighting you. People clapped and took photos. Kids ran around in the snow. Someone had brought hot chocolate and cookies. It felt like a real community gathering, the kind of thing that made living in Clearwater Estates worthwhile. Winter settled in with its usual intensity. The trails were busy with snow machines, cross-country skiers, and people just walking their dogs. I kept up my regular maintenance schedule, and the new HOA board was supportive every step of the way. Whenever I needed access to community property for trail work, I just sent a quick email and got immediate approval. In December, I received a check from the HOA for $5,000, the sanctions Judge Mitchell had imposed. I donated half of it to the county's trail maintenance fund and used the rest to buy new equipment for volunteer work. It felt right to turn something negative into something that would benefit the community. Patricia and her family moved away in January. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that they had relocated back to Arizona. I felt a complicated mix of emotions about that. I hadn't wanted to drive anyone out of the community, but I also couldn't pretend to be sad that the source of so much conflict was gone. The new year brought new snow and new opportunities for trail maintenance. I was out working on a Saturday morning in February when I ran into a family I didn't recognize. They had just moved to Clearwater Estates, and they were exploring the trails on their snow machines. "Are you Patrick Barnes?" the father asked when we stopped to chat. "I am." "I'm Jeff Wilson. This is my wife Amanda and our kids. We just bought a house here last month." When we were looking at properties, the realtor told us about the amazing trail system and mentioned you specifically. "He said you were a local legend." I laughed, embarrassed. "I don't know about legend. I just maintain the trails." "Well, my kids are learning to ride, and having safe, well-maintained trails makes all the difference, so thank you." His daughter, who looked about 10, piped up. "Can I help with trail maintenance when I'm older?" "Absolutely," I said. "The county always needs more volunteers. When you turn 16, come talk to me and I'll help you get set up with the volunteer program." As they rode away, I felt a sense of satisfaction that had nothing to do with awards or recognition. This was what it was all about, making it possible for families to enjoy the incredible landscape we were privileged to live in, passing on traditions and knowledge to the next generation, being part of something larger than ourselves. In March, the county held a training session for new trail volunteers. Richard Chen asked if I would help lead the training, sharing my experience and knowledge with the new recruits. I agreed, and spent a Saturday teaching a dozen people about trail safety, maintenance techniques, and coordination with the county. One of the new volunteers was a woman in her 30s named Jennifer Park. She had recently retired from the military and was looking for ways to stay active and contribute to her new community. After the training, she approached me with questions about Snowmachine trail maintenance specifically. "I've ridden snow machines recreationally, but I've never thought about the maintenance side," Jennifer said. "How did you get into this?" I told her about growing up in Alaska, learning from my father, and how maintaining trails had become a way to give back to the community. I also told her in brief terms about the HOA situation. "So you kept volunteering even when your HOA was fining you?" Jennifer asked, impressed. "It wasn't really a choice. The trails needed maintenance, and I wasn't going to let one person's power trip stop me from doing something important." "That's dedication. I hope I can be that committed. Just show up and do the work. That's all it takes." By April, Jennifer had become a regular volunteer. She and I often coordinated our trail maintenance schedules, and it was nice to have a partner who was equally enthusiastic about the work. The county noticed our effective teamwork and started assigning us to more complex projects. One Saturday in May, we were working on a section of trail that had been damaged by spring flooding. The runoff had created deep ruts and washed out part of the trail base. We spent hours hauling gravel, reshaping the trail bed, and installing drainage to prevent future damage. As we worked, Jennifer said, "I heard there's going to be another volunteer appreciation dinner in August. Are you going?" "Probably. Richard likes to see everyone there." "I hope I'm doing enough to deserve an invitation." "You've logged over 100 hours already this year. Trust me, you're doing plenty." The spring and summer passed quickly. The snow melted, the trails dried out, and we shifted from Snowmachine maintenance to summer trail work. I continued to receive occasional thank you messages from neighbors and other trail users. The new HOA board remained supportive, and life in Clearwater Estates felt stable and positive for the first time in years. In July, I received a letter from the Fairbanks North Star Borough. It was from the Borough Assembly, the local legislative body. The letter informed me that I had been nominated for the borough's Outstanding Volunteer Award, which was given annually to recognize exceptional community service. I called Richard Chen. "Did you nominate me for this borough award?" "I did, along with about 30 other people. Patrick, you've become something of a local hero. The story of you standing up to your HOA while continuing to volunteer has inspired a lot of people. The Assembly wanted to recognize that. I'm not a hero. I just didn't want to stop doing something I love." "That's exactly why you deserve the recognition. You did the right thing even when it was difficult." The Borough Award ceremony was scheduled for the first week of August, a couple of weeks before the county's Volunteer Appreciation Dinner. I invited my parents to attend, and they drove up from Anchorage for the event. My dad pulled me aside before the ceremony. "I'm proud of you, son. Not just for the volunteer work, but for standing up to that HOA. Your mom and I taught you to do what's right even when it's hard. You lived up to that." "Thanks, Dad. I learned from the best." The ceremony was held in the Borough Assembly chambers. There were about 50 people in attendance, including several assembly members, county staff, and other community members. The assembly chair, a man named Robert Sullivan, gave a speech about the importance of volunteer service and how volunteers were the backbone of the community. Then he called me forward. "Patrick Barnes has volunteered over 800 hours in the past 3 years maintaining our trail system. But what makes Patrick's service especially noteworthy is his dedication in the face of adversity. Many of you have heard about the legal battle he fought with his homeowners association. Despite facing thousands of dollars in fines and constant harassment, Patrick never stopped volunteering. He never stopped showing up to maintain the trails that so many of us enjoy. His commitment and integrity are an example to all of us." Assembly member Sullivan presented me with a plaque and a certificate. Then something unexpected happened. The entire room stood and applauded. It wasn't polite ceremonial applause, it was genuine appreciation. People were cheering. I stood there feeling overwhelmed. I had started maintaining trails because I enjoyed it and because it needed to be done. I never imagined it would lead to this kind of recognition, or that my fight with the HOA would resonate with so many people. After the ceremony, people lined up to shake my hand and thank me. Some shared their own stories of HOA overreach or community conflicts. Others just wanted to express appreciation for the trails. One elderly man told me that the trail system had been a lifeline after his wife died, giving him a reason to get outside and stay active. "Your work matters more than you know," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for not giving up." 2 weeks later was the county's Volunteer Appreciation Dinner. This year felt different. I wasn't fighting a legal battle or dealing with HOA harassment. I could just enjoy the evening and celebrate with my fellow volunteers. Jennifer Park received recognition as Rookie Volunteer of the Year for her outstanding work in her first season. She was thrilled and gave a gracious speech thanking Richard Chen and the other experienced volunteers, including me, for their mentorship. Richard Chen gave his annual speech about volunteer service. Then he said something that caught my attention. This year, we're establishing a new award. The Patrick Barnes Perseverance Award will be given annually to a volunteer who demonstrates exceptional dedication in the face of challenges. We're naming this award after Patrick because his example this past year embodies what we hope all our volunteers will remember. That service to the community is worth fighting for. I felt my eyes water. Having an award named after me was humbling and slightly embarrassing, but it also felt like validation that everything I had gone through meant something. The first recipient of the award was an older volunteer named Frank Morrison, who had continued trail maintenance work while recovering from cancer treatment. Frank had been one of my mentors when I first started volunteering, and seeing him honored made the whole thing feel full circle. As the evening wound down, Dave Morrison found me at my table. He had come to the dinner as a guest, wanting to support the volunteer program. "The HOA board wants you to know something," Dave said. "The board has been tracking trail usage, and we've seen a 40% increase in the past year. People are using the trails more because they know they're well maintained and safe. Property values in Clearwater Estates have gone up partly because of the trail access. You haven't just made our community better, you've made it more valuable. I'm glad people are using the trails. That's what they're there for." The board is also thinking about doing more to support the county trail program. We might establish a small fund to help pay for equipment and supplies for volunteers. We want to turn Clearwater Estates into a model for how HOAs can support rather than hinder community service. That made me smile. It was a complete reversal from where things had been just a year earlier. "That would be great, Dave. I know Richard and the county would appreciate that support." Fall arrived with its spectacular display of colors. The trees turned gold and red, and the air took on the crisp quality that signaled winter was coming. I spent my weekends preparing the trails for the snow season, clearing brush that had grown over the summer and repairing any damage from the previous winter. In October, I received one final piece of mail related to the HOA situation. It was from Gary Peterson, the HOA's attorney. Inside was a brief note and a check. The note read, "Mr. Barnes, enclosed please find a check for $2,487 representing the HOA's final payment of sanctions and fees as ordered by the court. The Clearwater Estates HOA wishes to formally apologize for the actions of the previous board and to express appreciation for your continued service to the community. We hope to work cooperatively with you in the future." The check was nice, but the apology meant more. It represented closure on a difficult chapter and the promise of a better relationship going forward. I deposited the check and made another donation to the County Trail Maintenance Fund. Then I went out to work on the trails, doing what I loved in the community I called home. Winter returned with heavy snow in November. The trails filled with snow machines, skiers, and families enjoying the winter landscape. Every time I was out doing maintenance work, people would stop to thank me or chat about trail conditions. The sense of community appreciation was palpable. One Saturday afternoon, I was grooming a section of trail when a young couple on a snow machine pulled up alongside me. The woman lowered her face mask and said, "Are you Patrick Barnes?" "I am." "I'm Emily Rodriguez. I'm Susan's daughter, My mom represented you in the HOA case. I remember your mom mentioning you. She did incredible work for me. She talks about your case all the time. She says it was one of her favorite cases because you were fighting for something that mattered and because you never backed down. She wanted me to tell you that if I ever saw you on the trails. Tell your mom I said thank you again. She made a huge difference. Emily and her partner rode off, and I continued grooming the trail. The sun was setting, painting the snow in shades of orange and pink. The temperature was dropping, and I could see my breath in the cold air. This was what I loved about Alaska. The landscape, the community, the sense that people could still make a difference by showing up and doing the work. The fight with the HOA had been exhausting and frustrating, but it had also reinforced my belief that doing the right thing mattered. As I loaded my equipment and prepared to head home, I thought about everything that had happened over the past 2 years. I had been fined, harassed, and dragged to court. But I had also been supported by neighbors, recognized by the county, and vindicated by a judge who saw through the nonsense. More importantly, the trails were better maintained than ever. More people were using them. More volunteers were getting involved. The HOA had transformed from an obstacle into a supporter. The county had strengthened its commitment to the trail system. One person standing up to injustice had created ripples that improved the entire community. That was worth every moment of stress and every dollar spent on legal fees. I drove home through the winter darkness, past houses decorated with Christmas lights, past neighbors clearing snow from their driveways, past kids building snowmen in their yards. This was my community, these were my neighbors, and these were the trails that connected us all. The next morning, I received an email from Richard Chen. The county was planning a major expansion of the trail system, and they wanted my input on the design and maintenance plan. It was exactly the kind of project I loved working on. I replied immediately, offering my thoughts and volunteering my time. Then I bundled up, grabbed my gear, and headed out to the trails. There was work to be done, and I was grateful to be able to do it. The story could have ended differently. If I had backed down when Patricia first started issuing fines, the HOA might have continued down a path of overreach and abuse. Other volunteers might have been discouraged from serving. The trails might have fallen into disrepair. But I stood my ground. I fought back. And in doing so, I discovered that communities are stronger than the individuals who try to control them through fear and intimidation. As I worked on the trails that winter day, grooming the snow and checking markers, I felt at peace. The fight was over. The right side had won. And the work continued. That's really what it was all about, the work. Not the recognition or the awards or the legal victories. Just the simple satisfaction of maintaining trails that brought joy and connection to hundreds of people. A snow machine approached from behind me. I moved to the side to let it pass, but the rider slowed down instead. It was Dave Morrison with his teenage son. "Patrick, beautiful day for trail work." "Every day is a good day for trail work," I replied. "My son wants to start volunteering next year when he turns 16. I told him you'd be the person to talk to." I looked at the kid, who seemed excited and a little nervous. "The county always needs more volunteers. Come find me next winter and I'll help you get started." "Thanks, Mr. Barnes. My dad says you're the reason we have such great trails." The trails are great because lots of people care about them and work to maintain them. I'm just one person. "Maybe," Dave said with a knowing smile, "but you're the person who made sure the work could continue." They rode off down the trail, father and son side by side, enjoying the winter day and the trail system that connected our community. I watched them go, then returned to my work. The sun was bright, the The snow was perfect and there were miles of trail ahead of me. It was a good day. It was a good life, and I was grateful for all of it, even the hard parts, because they had led me to this moment of simple satisfaction. I continued grooming the trail, thinking about nothing in particular, just enjoying the work and the beautiful day. This was where I belonged. This was what I was meant to do, and no HOA fine or legal battle could ever take that away from me.